So let's see. I feel kind of humble in trying to honor Venus and her beautiful cycles with the earth and the sun. And yeah, I want to try my best to give you a sense of the astronomy of the sun, Venus, earth dance. And I want to begin. There's this remarkable thing about the Venus cycle where if you trace the amount of time from that ceremony I just mentioned, the ceremony of the heliacal rise, the first time Venus is visible in the morning sky, if you trace the amount of time that goes from that happening, after that happens, she spends 263 days visible in the morning sky. And this is before sunrise. She is visible at first just for 20 minutes at the first heliacal rise. And then eventually she's visible for longer, an hour. Pretty soon it's an hour. And then a couple months later, it's 2 hours. And ultimately she can be visible up to 3 hours in both the morning sky phase and the evening sky phase. But first she spends 263 days in the morning sky, and then she's invisible on the other side of the sun. And I'm going to give you, I have an app that'll show you the astronomy. I have a couple visuals. And then she spends 50 or 60 days invisible on the other side of the sun. And that's where we are right now. She is not visible, but soon will be. She's going to be visible in the evening sky just after sunset, starting around February 18th. And we're going to look at a calendar a little later. But around February 18th, she'll be 17th, 18th, it could be the 15th, 16th, first visibility. It's actually the 18th where she is joined by the moon, and also Mercury will be visible very close to the moon with Venus below. This will happen around February 18th. But basically, we've been in this phase that's about 50 to 60 days of invisibility on the other side of the sun. In the Inanna tradition, that's when she's said to be in the underworld. In the Inanna myth, she, if I can remember it well, the story is her sister's husband has died, and her sister is the queen of the underworld. And so she wants to go to the underworld to honor this passing of her sister's beloved. And in order to do that, she has to pass through 7 gates. And at each of those 7 gates, she has to take off a piece of her clothing. Like at first it's like her crown, and then it's her breastplate, and then it's her bracelets. I'm not sure of the order, but there's 7 gates and 7 of her pieces of her attire until she's nude in the underworld, whereupon she is basically murdered. It's a complicated story. And then there's a mythic figure that comes and rescues her, and she exits the underworld. And this would be equivalent to the end of the 50, 60-day cycle, basically where we are now. She's exiting the underworld and will soon be visible after sunset. And then she's going to spend 263 days in the evening sky after sunset. Again, visible for longer and longer periods of time, up to 3 hours. And then she stations retrograde and quickly descends to be invisible in front of the sun, between the earth and the sun. The light of the sun is too bright, can't see her, but it's only like 8 to 10 days where she's not visible during that stage. And then she rises again, the first heliacal rise, where these big ceremonies happen. That whole period of time is 584 days. And what's remarkable about that 584-day period. It's a 19-month period from heliacal rise to heliacal rise. Is after one of those cycles, it moves to a different part of the zodiac. Basically, she is visible at a different season the first time she rises. And then the next time, 19 months later, it's a different season again that she is visible in the morning sky for the first time. And then it happens a fourth time in a different season. And then the fifth time, it returns to the first position. And so 5 of those 19-month cycles are equivalent to an 8-year period of time on the Earth. So 5 of those cycles fit perfectly into an 8-year time span. And so what's remarkable about this is if you go back in time 8 years from now, the Sun, Venus, Earth relationship is exactly the same. And so 8 years ago, the Sun, Venus would be exactly in the same position behind the Sun, about to be visible in the evening sky for the first time, and it's in the exact same position. And so you can do this with your birthday. 8 years after your birthday, the Sun-Venus relationship is exactly the same as it was at your birth. And so this is called your Venus return every 8 years. And so age 8, 16, 24, etc. And some astrologers really work with this 8-year cycle strongly. I'll just say my own personal experience. When I first learned astrology back in the 90s, 95 was when I first took a serious class in astrology. And the focus, this was in a graduate school setting, and the focus on Venus was more about archetypes as opposed to like actual visual astronomy. And so there wasn't assignments to actually go out and follow the cycle of Venus, to be aware of when she's in the evening sky, in the morning sky. I just knew about her relationships to the other planets. I knew when she was conjunct Neptune or conjunct Pluto. I was tracking that in natal charts and transits and so forth. But I was completely clueless about this 8-year cycle, the 19-month cycle. Venus returns to the way I thought of them at that point was just pretty much every year. It takes, I think it's 263 days for Venus to go one revolution around the sun, just like it takes 365 days for the Earth to go around the sun. I think it's 263 days. But because the Earth is moving, Venus takes that full 584-day period to catch up with the Earth. But she goes around the zodiac every 263 days. And so you can have your transit of Venus returning to where it was when you were born. It's more like once a year, as opposed to the Venus return that I was talking about, the 8-year Venus return, where the Sun, Venus, Earth relationship is exactly the same as it was when you were born. And this is very precise. It's within it's within 1 degree, basically, 1 or 2 degrees. And this is the cycle that the Mayans started to understand. The Sumerian tradition with Inanna, they were very aware of it. I believe that Australian group was very aware of it. And so it's something, it's a kind of secret, powerful Venus mystery school when you have to pay attention to her regularly over a 19-month period first. And then you got to string together 8 years of that. So it takes really an 8-year period of devotion to Venus to begin to unlock her mysteries and to recognize this beautiful symmetry. She forms a pentagram with those 5 different moments in the cycle, and that pentagram is sometimes called the Rose of Venus. And so now that I've kind of outlined it in that way, I want to give you some visual understanding of it after I sip my tea here. So this gives you a sense of what I just described visually. And so this is a heliocentric representation of it. So Venus is the green ball here, and Earth is this blue ball. And so you can see, basically look for when it catches up with the Earth and is in alignment with the sun. And you'll see that that happens 5 times and forms the rose pattern. There's the first one. Here she comes again. You'll see it's in a different part of the sky right here, different season. And then she catches up over here somewhere. So there's the third one. And she's going to catch up again over here. Boom. And then once more over here. And I'm not sure if it shows the, yeah, I guess the 5th one is where it was the first time. And it does that 1 degree difference every 8 years. I don't know if it's a full degree. It shifts slightly over time. And I think it takes over a century for it to go all the way, for it to shift a degree at a time over a 365-day circle. And so there's this larger pattern also that lasts over a century. But let me come back to this here. This is, not sure how this is different. I think this is one. Guess it's going to show it. So again, this whole pentagram formation takes 8 years. And so it's one thing I want us to be meditating on today. And I want to do a little journaling after I show you a couple more visual representations where you can be thinking about, like what was happening for you 19 months ago, basically I should say, 19 months ago around February 18th. That'll be the moment when Venus first came back to the evening sky. 19 months ago, she first came back to the evening sky. So part of this Venus practice, I would say, and coming back to my own story, I really shifted my approach from a kind of more academic approach to astrology or depth psychological approach to astrology. I still honor that and value that approach, but I shifted more towards the direction of sky watching astrology and direct visual contact with the sky. The one school of astrology, the larger school of astrology, that tradition that is in this kind of sky watching approach is shamanic astrology, founded by Daniel Giammario and Kaylin Castell. Highly recommend checking out their stuff. And so, yes, coming back to the visual aids here, I'm just going to show you now a geocentric representation of the pentagram, the rose of Venus here, and here we go. This is, from the Earth's perspective, it seems like the sun is moving, right? And Venus moving as well. And so you can see in this case, it's Venus moving around the Earth and the sun moving around the Earth. And these moments where she's in here, this is where that heliacal rise moment happens, when she's closest to the Earth. That's, I think, a very special dimension of like why cultures have put such a emphasis on these interior conjunctions of the sun Venus. And every time she goes retrograde and moves from the evening sky to the morning sky, she comes closest to the Earth in her orbit. That's right here. She's closest to the Earth. And then she moves as far away from the Earth. That's where we are right now. She's out here. And then she moves back in as she approaches the end of her evening cycle. And so she's about to finish the 8-year process here as she comes back to the, or I guess, okay. Now one more visual aid. And this is an awesome piece of software. This is called Solar System Scope. And yeah, let's see. So this is actually where the planets are right now. And so here's Earth, here's the sun. So the sun is currently blocking the light of Mercury, Venus, and Mars. We've just come out, if you've been at my earlier workshops, we've just come out of this very intense alignment of Pluto, Mars, Venus, and Mercury, all in alignment with Venus, or excuse me, with the sun and the Earth. And there was a moment where it was with the moon as well. Maybe I'll just go backwards in time here. I think I can do it this way. Guess it's like right in here. You can see the alignment. So it's not exact. Here on January 18th, actually it was the Earth, the moon, sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and you can see Pluto out here. That's a super rare, is that 5 planets? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It was 6-planet conjunction. And I guess that's one question I would have for you, and one kind of prompt for journaling is like, what has this recent period been like? The month of January has been pretty intense, and this alignment with Pluto is just now separating. So we've had a Mars-Pluto conjunction, which can be super intense, prone to violence, aggressive energies. What's been erupting in the United States in recent weeks is very consistent with Mars, Pluto especially, but a super strong activation of Pluto where there can be an eruption of libidinal primal energies, eruptions of shadow material, maybe especially for the United States, who's just completing the Pluto return of the United States and moving towards the Uranus return. Very strong moments in the astrological history of the United States. But it's been this very powerful alignment in the recent few weeks, but then also meditating on the larger time period of the last 2 months, basically, that Venus has been invisible on the other side of the sun. The idea with this Venus practice, if you get into the 19-month practice and the larger 8-year initiation, you want to be tuning in to what was happening at some of the really important parts of her cycle, whether it's the heliacal rise or when she first goes invisible on the other side of the sun, when she first becomes visible again, the moment when she's at her maximum, they call it maximum elongation. That's the period when she's visible up to 3 hours. And then her retrograde moment where she's moving closer to the Earth. And then the exact return to the Earth, the Sun-Venus conjunction called the Cazimi, called the kiss, when Venus kisses the Earth, is super important. And it's basically the same energy of that first heliacal rise. And so when you're doing this Venus practice, you're trying to tune into what's the flavor, what's the feeling tone of when she's in the evening sky versus when she's in the morning sky versus when she's invisible on the other side of the sun. And so this is a really good moment right now to be tuning into what's it been like for you in this underworld phase of Venus. What's it been like for you in this underworld phase of Venus? And then maybe you've already been attuning to it. Some of you have taken classes with me, so you may have been following the cycle actually back to 2019, especially the more recent classes. And it's like tuning into what's my experience been of this cycle. You can focus on so many different cycles in astrology. Like, for example, I have been very focused on the 7-year cycle of Saturn. It takes 7 years for Saturn to move 90 degrees. And it's super interesting to pay attention to anything that you begin, like that first moment for me in 2019 when I was doing that kind of Venus ritual with the Tarot and Flow class. That was almost exactly 7 years ago. And there's something that can happen in a 7-year window that's very Saturnian. It's like a crossroads. That 7-year point is a crossroads of maturation. And sometimes there's a sense of like working more and focusing more on whatever began 7 years ago to build even more solid structures with that thing that you began, whether it's a career or you began a relationship, the 7-year itch, or it could be the beginning of a band or the beginning of a business. You can look at that 7-year cycle and really attune to it. It's super helpful to tune into the Saturn cycle. But this is a totally different thing. It's the cycle of Venus, and Venus is about love and beauty and pleasure and sweetness and art and music. She's been known culturally as other things, like in the Mayan tradition, her morning sky phase, she was thought of as more of like a war god, which is very interesting. There's actually some other cultures that have had that. But I don't know, for me and in the astrological tradition, in the modern period, she's about love, she's about beauty, she's about pleasure. And of course, when you look at her, she's strikingly beautiful just on her own. Like the beauty of her in the sky is so striking. But then it's like, especially when Venus combines with another planet, whether it's the moon or Jupiter or Saturn, she becomes even more striking, and she like beautifies the second planet. You really feel that with the moon Venus conjunctions. She is beautifying the moon, and the moon is bringing us into a more nurturing and caring and emotional relationship with Venus. And that has been my experience every time I've kind of ritualized a moon Venus conjunction, or most of the time. There's more of this emotional dimension to the relationship with Venus, a feeling dimension, and other things like the moon is that kind of caring family energy. Coming back to this piece of software here, this was January 18th, but now if we move ahead here, this is where we are now, still Venus not visible. But let's go forward to February 18th. And for this, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And basically what's happening here astronomically is Venus is starting to peek out along with Mercury, the other side of the sun, just so there's briefly some light of Mercury and Venus visible. Basically, if you watch from here, this is the nighttime side of the Earth. This is the other side, of course, is the daytime. Not going to see Venus in the daytime, but just after sunset on this side. And so if you watch the Earth, so let's see if I can slowly rotate it here. A little bit slower. So like watch where basically this is the sunset point, as here you can see like South America and North America are moving into the night. And just as they get into the night, there's a brief window, at first just 15, 20 minutes, when you can see Venus's light, and in this case, Mercury's light also. You can kind of sense it here. Just a little bit of the light visible only for 15, 20 minutes, and then moving longer and longer. We can go forward here into March. This is where, I think it's March 17th, that the moon is back. Software is pretty remarkable. You can see the moon's actual position here. So it must be, yeah, the 18th. Look what's happening on the 18th. So March 18th. At this point, Venus will be visible for more like 40 minutes or an hour. We'll look at my calendar in a minute. But you can see right after sunset on the 18th. Actually, I got to go back here. So if we look from here, the moon, the crescent moon will be visible over here, and you can see a lot more of Venus at this point. And because she's peeked out much further from behind the sun, you can see her for longer. And so if you get further here, if we go out to around here, I think it's further, like at this point, Venus is approaching more of the maximum elongation. I think we have to go more into, I think it's in June. So by June, you can see she's come out into this part of her orbit, and so much more of her light is visible for much longer. And this is the point where it's more like 2 or 3 hours that she's visible. This is a special moment here. You can see this is in June. There is a Venus-Jupiter conjunction, and there's a moment. Let's see here. This is where the moon is on it. So it's around June 17th. You can see from the perspective of the Earth, you see the moon, and then Venus, and then Jupiter. That's one of the most special conjunctions. If we come back to here, this is where we are again. We're moving towards in March. Okay, look what's coming here. We're going to really focus on this alignment. This is where the Earth and Venus and Saturn form a triple conjunction, and you can see out here we have Neptune. So it's a Venus, Saturn, Neptune triple conjunction that'll be happening for a couple weeks in here. The moon doesn't really exactly align with it. So it's unlike last year where there were 3 moon, Venus, Saturn, Neptune quadruple conjunctions because Venus's retrograde phase went across the Saturn, Neptune. This will just be a Venus, Saturn, Neptune triple conjunction, but really powerful and important alignment that's coming in less than 2 months, just a month and 10 days or something. And so I'm going to talk about that one when we start to actually explore some of the meaning and potential of these alignments. And so that, I think, ends my visual aids, but I think this is a good point to open up to questions. Okay, Teresa, what's your question or comment?
Okay, so I really enjoyed the prayers that you did. And one of the feelings that I got was like Venus kind of being given an assignment from the sun, to kind of be that creatrix or kind of nurture and manage uh, life on Earth, life on the planet. And I had not made that personal connection before, as if I'm actually, it helped me understand the assignment the other planets have been given in a more, I'm going to say, kind of a managerial way, like these are your administrative kind of things that you do. But I began to see that, like that oversight, that feeling of being assigned in that way, to these qualities that you are talking about. So that was new after all these years. And I have been tracking Venus moon. I mean, who doesn't love Venus for 10, 15 years? I'm a sky watcher. I must watch the sky, you know.
Oh,
So
me.
there's that. And the other thing is that, oh, I don't know if I was feeling a little bit of self-pity or whatever, but it's like I really love how you have harmonized with these cycles, like with your awareness. And it's like, I'm not feeling like I really captured how to harmonize with the cycles. There's been
Ah,
a lot of disruption, and it's like, I can be grateful. I have many blessings, but to point to phases and say, oh, this was really a wonderful phase. I can say it was very creative or it was this or that, but that sense of being nurtured or whatever, I have to now I'm experiencing it now, but there's been a lot of these past years that haven't felt like that. So I just like to hear what you have to say about harmonizing with these cycles and when it doesn't
right,
feel harmonizing.
right. Yeah, and Venus is the planet of harmonizing, connected with Libra, the sign of harmony. Harmony. Um, yeah, thank you for that. I I think for sure it has something to do with kind of intentionality. Like I intend to live in harmony with the cycles of Venus. I think that's like very strong intention, and it wasn't on my radar at all for the first 20 years of my astrology practice. I was more attuned to the archetype of Venus, mythology of Venus, but then to actually once I became aware of these 19-month and 8-year the 8-year cycle and 19-month cycle, evening sky, morning sky, it's like especially really regularly getting out to see her in these different phases, you can't help but start to harmonize with these cycles and to kind of choose to align with them. And I think it's more like allow Venus to pull you into her orbit, allow Venus to harmonize you. It's like as soon as you really start extending yourself to her, my experience in consciousness very strongly is that she sees us seeing her, the actual planet. And she's like, oh, you're watching me. Oh, you see me. Thank you for seeing me. And then she's like wanting to give you gifts. She wants to bring you her energy and also pull you towards her energy, pull you towards the possibilities of Venus, pull you towards love, pull you towards intimacy, definitely pull you towards beauty and music. And it's like the more you kind of renew that commitment to her, and she sees you renewing the commitment to her, and she sees you really paying attention to these cycles, it's like, wow, I've got a devoted fan. Here are my beloved fans, and I want to give them the best performance that I'm capable of. And my experience has been like that she pulls me to certain locations at certain times when the most spectacular things are happening in the sky somehow through some mystery, when the best sunsets are happening or the most special things that are happening on the horizon, whether that's a tree or a mountain or a building. It's like she definitely brings this kind of pull of gravity on a consciousness level towards initiatory experiences of her energy. And so it's a magic experience, not an experience that I had before when it was more ephemeris astrology, studying famous charts astrology. Not to disparage those, I think they're awesome part of astrological learning, but to follow her cycles in a direct one-to-one, like, I want to be friends with you, Venus, let's hang out, Venus, take me to magic, Venus. And she's like, okay, let's go on the adventure. I'm going to pull you to some really cool timelines. I'm going to pull you to more magic, more love in your life because I see you're devoted to me. You want to learn from me. And so that's how I would say I've kind of harmonized with her. I've had so many experiences where she's woken me up. I feel like, especially in the morning sky phase, you have to get up, an hour or two or three before sunrise, depending on, how much time you want to spend with her. And of course, sky conditions can obscure her if it's cloudy or raining, or it's just, lots of things can obscure her view. And that's part of what's special about the practice, I feel, is yeah, there's lots of times where you may go out and not see her. And you can still really connect with her, but those times when you do see her, you recognize kind of the preciousness of that. And especially it's like those moon Venus conjunctions. There's times when they're not visible. It's like, oh, I didn't get to see them. But more often than not, my experience has been, especially with the morning sky ones, that I feel pulled to wake up. And I go out and it's like she's just peeking out from behind the clouds, or it's like there's just a 10-minute window where I had the opportunity to see her, where I saw the weather forecast was going to be rainy, but she's just there for 10 minutes or whatever. So those are some thoughts, Teresa. I don't know if that's
Um,
helpful.
but it's helpful, and I want to ask you about when um, Venus is invisible and down in there in the depths,
Hmm.
and maybe in the on the meat hook, you
Right.
know.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm wondering if, like, I don't know if that's the dark side of Venus or whatever, but maybe
Yeah.
that kind of gets all mixed up in there, when we're like feeling the connection, or when things are more chaotic or more maybe unharmonizing.
Right.
So I'm going to mute and disappear, from the screen, but I'm here listening. So thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Let's see. I'll remove this. Um, Great question about her shadow side. Um, my wife sometimes says I'm too focused on her positive attributes. That's what it's kind of what I've fallen in love with. But there's definitely like the Venus Saturn dimensions of her and the Venus Pluto dimensions of her. Venus Pluto's more, the shadow potential of love, the extremes of love, the intensity of love, the drama of love. There's lots of painful experiences that people have with love and with lovers, and so I definitely think it's important to acknowledge that. And there's lots of ways to kind of look at that, where you can have very powerful astrological transits, like a Saturn transit to your natal Venus or a Pluto transit to your natal Venus, where there might be more of the likelihood of experiencing some of her more painful potential. And yet there's also this awareness, this new awareness for me of like really paying attention to her underworld phase. And I think, yeah, I was resistant, I should say. I've had a hard time with the dominance of the Inanna mythology, and I kind of feel like it kind of comes out of a patriarchal warring culture, which has been true for a lot of cultures. And so that image of her in the underworld on the hook, murdered, it's a heavy representation of Venus on the other side of the sun. And I've kind of been resisting that that's going to be true for me or for other people, that it's going to be kind of universally that kind of shadow side of Venus. And this particular Venus cycle, where she's been in the underworld the last couple months, and also aware of her morning star phase, where the first couple months that she's in the morning sky, she's still really close to the Earth. She's still really bright, but then she lowers in the sky. She's visible less and less until she disappears on the other side of the sun. And like that's the time when Venus is leaving the Earth. She's just come and kissed the Earth. There's this kind of embrace at the inner Kazemi, and then she's leaving. And I definitely have felt a kind of poignant sadness that's sometimes there when she's in the morning sky, like a kind of farewell that we're saying, like so many gifts come. I personally love the evening sky phase. That's where we're headed in just a few weeks here. 3 weeks, she's going to be back in the evening sky. And I just love the energy of the evening sky phase where, it's happening after sunset and you go out to enjoy the sunset with your friend. Or if you take my Venus class that's coming up, you somehow time it so you're going out with your Venus buddy. You're aware that you're both going out. You somehow share a connection around it. And it's like those first couple hours after sunset, we're of course very awake. It's often the end of a workday. And it's like, that's your pleasure time. That's when you go to have fun. That's when you go to a meal. And for me, I ritualize the evening gates with my wife as date nights. So at least once a month, we're going to go out on a date. Hopefully a lot more than that, but at least once a month. It's been with the 2-year-old, now 3-year-old. It's a little challenging to get out on a lot of dates, but we made it a real point on the Moon-Venus conjunctions. And I should say they are visible close together for 2 or 3 nights. It's not just one night. And so there's something super sweet about when she's in the evening sky, and that's when she's returning to the Earth. Each month that passes in those 8 months that she's in the evening sky, she's returning and getting closer and closer to us. And there's a felt sense on a consciousness level and a visual level that she's getting closer. It's like love is coming back. When she's in the so-called underworld, when she's invisible on the other side of the sun, I definitely now having like really focused on, I think it's this is like maybe the 4th time I've been super aware. We got married under the first Venus underworld phase. So that's one case in point where something really happy was happening. But I should say we got married just as a hurricane was coming into Florida at the time. And it was also a super stressful time, really intense, of course, for me moving from the United States to Colombia. And so it was demanding. And now that I've tracked it 3 or 4 times, there is definitely a feeling of, okay, this is a deep moment. This is a deep moment, and there is a kind of underworld tone to it. There's a sense that she's the furthest away that she's going to get. We can't see her. She's so far away. And there's something kind of deep and powerful and poignant and maybe to some degree like stressful about this phase. And so that has been true for me. But I guess my invitation to everybody in our postmodern cultural situation, it's like there's this ability for each of us to have our own direct experience of Venus and of these phases of her cycle. My point is that it's like we each develop our own unique connection with these different phases. And it's like our unique thought forms and the way we feel about those moments will tend to shape how they will be going forward to some extent. It's both a kind of new experience each time, but it's like you start to have your own unique experience of these phases. And so I don't want to say that there's any definite quality to any of these phases. It's like we each have to do our own experiment with Venus and this full 584-day cycle and the 8-year cycle. And yes, so I guess that would be a question for each of you, is to kind of tune in to how the last couple of months have been for you. Can you sense, if you tune into Venus directly, can you sense a feeling of, wow, she's been far away? I miss you, Venus. I miss you. I've been missing you. And she's just about to come back. And so tuning into now, what's the feeling of the last couple months? But then I hope some of you will, I know some of you are, and I hope some more of you will be joining my class coming up, the Venus Evening Gates Journey, where we're going to be meeting once a month on the Saturday before the new moon. The first meeting is on Valentine's Day, and then one meeting a month up through October, when she will be coming to her closest point to the Earth. The kiss will be happening, and that'll be the end of the class. And so, by the way, maybe this is a good moment to just do my plug for the class. Does everybody see what I posted in the chat here? Do people see my links and whatnot? There's everybody that's registered for the class, either who's live here or the recording, can get a $75 discount on my readings up through Tuesday. And then there's information about the Venus Gate class and a link to the page where all that information is. And there's also a link here to my Tarot and Flow self-study program, which comes free if you join the Venus class, and also some links to the workshops I just did, the 3 workshops on the astrology of 2026, and last year's workshops on the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And also there was one workshop that really focused on the Venus-Saturn-Neptune conjunctions that I mentioned earlier. Let me just say one more thing. I'm super excited for the class. I'm super excited to, I've done this in my previous classes, but those just would span like 2 or 3 months. And they would meet like mostly once a week, versus this is a once a month journey, which I think is going to have a very different tone. My hope is that we'll create a kind of learning community of researchers, experimenters who are going out regularly to see Venus. And I hope there'll be a lot of intimacy and sharing in the class where we're invoking Venus. We're trying to bring Venus into our class learning experience. And so I think it's going to be a Venusian experience with lots of love and beauty. And yeah, we're going to look at a lot of different things in the class. But the focus is going to be, doing the monthly practice and then coming back and sharing the experience. I'm going to be definitely looking more at some of the different world traditions of Venus. Like, I'm excited to go deeper into that myself and share my learnings with you. And yes, thank you. The book Venus Star Rising by Ariel Gutman. Yeah, those 2 books, Light of Venus, I think was the Gainsbourg book, and Venus Star Rising. The Venus Star Rising by Gutman is like, she had this breakthrough around these 8-year points being at the same point basically, and she calls them the Venus star points, and she tracks them in a way where people haven't seen some of her patterns. Like, there's actually a 4-year process where every 4 years, the same spot where the interior conjunction, the kiss, happens, that exact same spot in the sky, or very close, the exterior conjunctions in these 4-year pulses. And she kind of talks about that in this book. All right. Fantastic. Okay. Louise, did you have something else?
Yeah. Could you say a little bit about the timing of, I guess, the first Venus Gate, February 18th,
Yes.
the day after the solar eclipse and 2 days before the exact of Saturn Neptune?
Great. Perfect transition, Louise. Thank you. That's where I wanted to go next. And for this, I'm going to put up my Venus calendar, which if you get a reading, join the class. This comes as part of the class. Wait a second. So I'm going to just go back here. This is, it was in November. So the end of the morning sky phase was around November 25th. That was the approximate last visibility of Venus in the morning sky. So maybe tuning in to around then. What was happening for you since around the end of November? That's when the underworld phase began. And I talk about this phase as the hidden star mysteries. And in December, the first hidden Rose Gate or hidden Venus Gate happened. And then in January, around the 18th, the second hidden Rose Gate, tends to be 2 or 3 that you can't see. And then more recently, on the 19th, Venus-Pluto conjunction exact. And any of these exact points on the calendar, Venus usually is about 2 weeks in its conjunctions. And so like a week before the 19th, the week after, so around the 26th of January, the Venus-Pluto would have separated a bit. And then in February, we've got the new moon on the 17th, and that's the annular solar eclipse that Louise is talking about. And so this is a unique situation where the return of Venus to the evening sky is also coinciding with eclipse season, which happens for about 2 weeks, twice a year. And so this is definitely going to be a unique flavor to the return of Venus, but also it's both a unique flavor for Venus, but also a unique flavor for the eclipse season. I am very curious to see if the fact that we're in, for me, it's a kind of celebratory moment. The last return of Venus to the evening sky, I just remember, actually the last 3 of them, I just got super excited. There's an exciting quality of her light returning, and for it to be visible after sunset, where you don't have to wake up early. You can make a special trip to, and I really encourage everybody to find a special spot where you go to see her. Not the same spot always, but someplace near your home, or maybe you have a view from your home where you can regularly see her. So it's like I remember waiting on our terrace here, and just like the first time she comes back, it's like, wow, thank you. I get to hang out with you for the next 8 months. And by the way, the last time she was in the evening sky was like 11 months ago. So there's this kind of joyous quality 11 months ago of the 19-month cycle. That's how you get like 8 months in the evening, 8 months in the morning. Anyway, 11 months since she was last in the evening, that really special date night phase. And it's like, oh, yay, she's back. I get to start going back on date nights. I get to have more of the pleasure of sunset visits, where you go, you enjoy the sunset, you hang out with a friend, and you just take in her light. And with the moon, it's that really special experience of it's maybe the most beautiful thing that you can see in the night sky regularly. There's lots of other beautiful things that you can see, comets and asteroid meteor showers and aurora borealis and eclipses. There's super awesome things you can see, but in terms of regular experiences of beauty, it's these monthly moon Venus conjunctions. There's nothing like it. And so yes, the eclipse thing here, let me say a little bit about it. We're about to go into eclipse season. At the same time, we're about to return to Venus in the evening sky. And I guess I would just say, generally speaking, eclipse season is kind of like what we were talking about for Venus in the underworld. It tends to be like a really deep dive into your psyche. What's happening at eclipses? It's a moment of hidden light. The bright light of the full moon is obscured for a few hours, or the bright light of the sun is obscured for a few minutes. And symbolically, it's like you go into the darkness. In the lunar eclipse, it's like you're already in the darkness, but it's the full moon, and so it's the brightest form of the night sky. But then the light of the moon is removed, and it's like you go into the deepest mysteries, the deepest hidden mysteries of the night. And with a solar eclipse, it's like the deepest hidden mysteries of the day. You go from this brilliant, totally bright light of the sun for a period of time. It's totally hidden, and you go right back into the dark. One thing that's super cool, if you happen to see a solar eclipse during the daytime, you can actually see Venus at the peak of the eclipse. And Marinella saw one. It's like, that's got to be so cool. I've never seen that. Be able to see Venus at midday. Super cool. But anyway, this is the general idea with eclipses. You go into the hidden realms of your psyche. With the moon, and it's the moon, sun, earth dance eclipses. And there's that lunar component where it's often, for me, there's like family stuff, family of origin material, stuff around siblings and the most vulnerable material of your psyche, really, can be more up, more available, more seen, more dynamic in your life. And so that is often demanding. The more I've focused on eclipses, that's another thing I wasn't as focused on in my academic phase of astrology, the more I've really focused on them, the more you get this sense of why they're so important in all world traditions, really, and really focused on in certain astrological traditions. The eclipses in the Vedic tradition and others are associated with a dragon, like a dragon's head and a dragon's tail, and the sense that it's like the sun is swallowed or the moon is swallowed by the dragon. And yeah, it's deep and mysterious. That's what I could say. And so that's playing out at the same time Venus is returning. That's going to be interesting. It's like, how can you kind of hold both? Hold the deep process of the eclipse season, which is for a couple of weeks, and the deep process of Venus's return, the Venus light returning, especially this moment. Here's the evening star mysteries. She's first visible. I think you can see her. This is the 10-degree point where she's 10 degrees away from the sun. I know you can see her at 9 degrees and maybe even 8 degrees. And so it's worth going out to try to see her on the 15th and 16th. But if you go out on the 17th, for sure, if you've got clear skies and you've got a clear line of sight to the horizon, nothing obscuring the horizon, like a building or a hill or whatever, then right after sunset, wait 20, 30 minutes, and she should be visible, like right above the horizon in the sunset colors, perhaps. And then just visible for 15 or 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes. And so here's that first evening rose gate on the 18th. If you get the calendar, you'll see I've made it, I hope, clear when she's the most visible. And this is all set, by the way. If you have the calendar, it's set for Columbia time. And so if you're like on Pacific time, or if you're in Europe, the exact moment of these conjunctions will be not super different, but every time zone change is like a half degree change. And I think it's like the exact conjunction happens just like a couple hours per time zone difference. I think that's about right. I have it written up here in the calendar. And so on the 17th, the moon sets at 6:25 p.m. in this time zone, 4 degrees below Venus. I think it's going to be hard to see the moon on the 17th unless you're like near Australia, I think. But on the 18th, Venus sets at 6:44 p.m., 8 degrees below an exact moon-Mercury conjunction. Venus sets 40 minutes after sunset. So if you can see her 20 to 30 minutes after sunset, then there's 10, 15 minutes of visibility. On the 28th, there's a Mercury-Venus conjunction, which is super cool. So it's not often the case that you can see Mercury. Mercury, the trickster, the fastest planet. A lot of even astrologers can go most of their career without seeing Mercury because they're not really trying to. But if you try to and you know when to look, when Mercury's at maximum elongation, you can definitely see them. And so let's see. I want to focus. Louise, did you have something else? Is that helpful about the eclipse?
Yes, really helpful, and nothing else. Thanks.
Okay, great. So, okay. So just in terms of focusing on the biggest moments with Venus in the coming months. I'm going to focus through her evening phase. This is one of the biggest. And now I'm going to, I'll just say here, we're looking at the Venus, Saturn, Neptune triple conjunction. So as we get towards March, there's an exact Saturn Neptune conjunction that's forming. It's already super tight. I'm going to put this up on the screen here. Let me go to my astrology software. Let's see here. So where we are today on January 31st, you can see over here this big stellium that earlier was super tight. You can see Mars is still just 3 degrees from Pluto, that kind of explosive, fiery, aggressive energy that's clearly been erupting in the United States, and the sense that there's the threat of war in Iran, and yeah, lots of stories that relate to that Mars-Pluto conjunction, but it's a Sun-Mars-Pluto triple conjunction. The Sun is still just 8 degrees from Pluto. Venus has moved well off Pluto, 14 degrees. Mercury is well off, but this big Aquarius stellium is definitely a big part of the energy of now. Aquarius season, very worth kind of tuning into the Aquarius energy, which, yeah, I don't think I want to go too much into it for the sake of time, but that's a big part of the energy of now. Dominant Aquarius season. But you can see over here the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which I've talked a lot about in my workshops and definitely talked a lot about last year. It's at its tightest phase, one of the biggest and climactic moments of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, with Neptune just in the last week moving into Aries. It's done with Pisces. Last year it moved into Aries and then retrograded back into Pisces. Now it's fully in Aries. It's not going to leave Aries for, I think it's 15 or 16 years. And, you know, that's a big difference when an outer planet moves from Pisces to Aries. Just total contrast, a water sign to a fire sign. And the most important fire sign, in terms of, it's the strongest of the fire signs, I would say, that burst of energy of springtime. And it's the ram, you know, that charging ahead energy, that leaping into action energy. It's the Mars, it's the sign associated with Mars. And so, yeah, the sense that we're leaping ahead with a new cycle of Neptune. I don't know if any of you have felt that kind of shift in the last week. I can tune into it. It's been a long period of both Saturn and Neptune. Neptune the last 15 something years, Saturn just the last 2.5 years. But these last 2.5 years where Saturn and Neptune have been in Pisces, as much as Pisces is, you know, spiritually great and great for tuning into, you know, other dimensions, and there's more of a quality of flow. It's also, it can be kind of dreamy and dissolving energies and confusing energies, and it's maybe too floaty. But to now be moving into a fire sign where there's a sense of forward movement, I think, is likely to be felt as a kind of positive shift, I think. And so here, Saturn's at the end of Pisces. It pretty soon moves into Aries. Where does it happen? Right before this first Venus gate, right here. It's actually on Valentine's Day, the first day of the Venus class I'm offering. That's when Saturn joins Neptune in the first degree of Aries, and that's going to be super interesting. It's going to be eclipse season. It's going to be this shift into Aries, and it's going to be the return of Venus to the evening sky. I think it's likely to be a very palpable shift of energies as we get here, but it's also, you know, a huge climactic moment of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction and everything that that's about, that I've talked a lot about in the last 3 workshops, so I'm not going to go too deep into it, but it's a challenging energy. It's got so many blessings. It has to do with spiritual maturity, spiritual wisdom, strengthening faith, taking your spiritual, psycho-spiritual life to the next level of maturity and wisdom. Has so many gifts in terms of, yeah, coming into a more grounded relationship with the divine. Saturn has to do with being grounded, and Neptune, the divine. But on the other hand, Neptune has to do with consciousness states, and Saturn can be contraction and fear. And so it's associated with difficult states of consciousness, anxiety, melancholy, disillusionment, grief, anger to some extent. Has a lot to do with like the stages of grief. And part of the stages of grief is there's an anger phase. And I think a lot of people around the world, of course, are in a lot of grief for different reasons. In the United States, I think there's a lot of grief for a certain part of over half of the population, I have to think. Grief about a kind of loss of the American dream, disillusionment around the American dream, maybe a recognition that the American dream hasn't been happening for quite some time. That kind of feeling, as well as, I think, a gift of a kind of disillusioned, clear seeing of reality, whether it's a positive reality or a more negative reality, seeing through to what's really going on in the world in terms of like the control matrix, the military industrial complex, intelligence agencies, kind of seeing through the bullshit to the actual situation, seeing past the propaganda of the mainstream media to the truth of it all. And so there's a real gift, a positive gift in that process. But then there's the disillusionment and sadness when you actually see things clearly. It's kind of like that moment in The Matrix, which came out during a Saturn-Neptune square at the end of the 90s in 99. 99? Am I getting it right? 1999. The moment when Neo goes through the cosmic wormhole and is on the other side and seeing reality. And it's a moment where he's just like really, in a kind of psycho-spiritual crisis and a kind of depression, and he vomits and it takes a long time to recover. And so it's like when you kind of see past the matrix, there is a period of, oh, fuck, this is reality? Fuck. And so there's a heaviness to Saturn, Neptune. On the other hand, it's like Neptune is the angelic realm, and Saturn is this Buddha's first noble truth that life contains suffering. And so it's like the way in which in moments of pain and suffering, the angels come closer. And so it's a very poignant combination. And I really want to focus on when Venus comes onto it. The first thing is looking at the 18th. Here on the 17th, you can see that's really close to the new moon. Just a few degrees between the moon and the sun, but you can see the moon is just 7 degrees from Venus. And if we just go to sunset on this day, you see as the sun is setting, the moon is just 5 degrees above, and Venus is 10 degrees above. So Venus should be visible on the 17th, but I don't think the moon, unless, as I said, you're like in Australia maybe. And but then on the 18th, here's a representation of what's going on. Venus, a full 10 degrees above the sun. That gives 40 minutes of visibility, or 40 minutes before Venus sets, 10 or 15 minutes of visibility. But like I said, above Venus, 8 degrees above Venus, is the moon in an exact conjunction with Mercury. And Mercury should be very visible, and this should be a pretty striking thing to connect with. And you can see that Saturn will also be visible. So it's actually 4 planets that are in the western, close to the western horizon. And you can even see Jupiter as well in the more in the eastern sky. So looking ahead from here, getting into March, this is, you can see before Mercury goes retrograde, here around the end of February, it's in an 8-9 degree conjunction with Saturn and Neptune. And so that's a significant activation. Mercury goes retrograde and moves off of it, but it is in a conjunction with Venus and Neptune. It's actually triple, quadruple conjunction. Venus, Mercury, Neptune, Saturn. They're all within 12 degrees here. Let's see. Yeah, at this point, they're all within 10 degrees. That's a pretty strong activation here. So this will definitely be a focus of our Venus practice in the class. But the main thing I want to focus on here, though, is the Venus, Saturn, Neptune triple conjunction, which comes in around February 27th. And then it gets tighter in early March. By the time you get to here, when Venus moves into Aries around March 5th or 6th, that's a super tight Venus, Saturn, Neptune triple conjunction. And so, and just to finish, it stays there another week or so until, around here, the 16th. So it's 10 days to 2 weeks that Venus is on the Saturn, Neptune. It's the last time that Venus will be strongly activating the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Like I said, it did so 3 times last year. And I guess what I would like to focus on and encourage you to think about is Venus is love, right? And it's the heart chakra opening. And as it combines with this Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which has some of those challenges that I named, it can be like fatigue, low energy. It's sometimes associated with illness and recovery from illness. And that's why I've really emphasized how important it is last year, this year, the first months of next year, while Saturn and Neptune are still conjunct, the focus on health, the focus on rest. It's like it is a time where you really want to avoid burning out, because Saturn, Neptune can be what it feels like when you're burned out, that state of consciousness where you're kind of depleted depleted in terms of contact with your higher self, your wholeness. On the other hand, it's like if you really focus on that, focus on rest, focus on sleep, focus on really maintaining positive psychospiritual, being in a positive psychospiritual state, being in a healthy state. It's like if you're really putting in the effort there, then you get much more of the payoff of Saturn Neptune, which is when you're protecting your health, when you're protecting your sleep, when you're really on the path to greater psychospiritual maturity. And so as Venus comes onto it during these couple of weeks, it's like the goddess of love is helping you with that. The goddess of love is inviting you to be more committed to yourself. The Venus-Saturn part of this, again, going back to, it comes in, earlier here, the end of February, but let's just focus, like as it gets to March, that's when it gets tighter. And so the Venus-Saturn conjunction, Saturn has to do with commitment and loyalty, and Venus is love, amongst other things. And so it's the loyal, committed lover. It has a lot to do with marriage, where you're committed till death do us part, or that kind of loyalty you have to your closest friends, where it's like, I've got your back. I've got your back. I'm going to be there when you need me. That's the feeling of Saturn Neptune. It's a great time to kind of allow in more support around you. If you're, say, struggling with some anxiety or fear, it's like attuning to Venus during these couple of weeks. You might notice that like Venus is coming towards you. Love is coming towards you and wanting to offer you solace and relief from whatever challenging state of consciousness you might be in. And this idea of being a kind of committed, loyal lover to yourself, where it's like, I got my own back. I'm going to show up for myself in this state where maybe you have a few days or a week where you're kind of in melancholy or grief or depression. And it's like we all Everyone that's committed to psychospiritual growth over at least a few years or a decade, it's like you learn enough about what helps you to be in a more balanced state of consciousness, a more positive state of consciousness. You have your yoga practice, you have your therapist, you have breath work, you have psychedelics, you have tarot, astrology, you have your whole bag of your medicine bag of different medicine practices. And it's like you bring those into your state of consciousness, or we might say Venus brings those practices back into your awareness. It's like Venus reminds you of how to be loyal to yourself. Venus reminds you of here are the practices that have proven in the past to open your heart and have the potential, even in these challenging moments, to open your heart again. And so this is definitely a time, a big moment in the year when we are invited to really lean into our psychospiritual growth, really lean into working to keep our heart open. That's Saturn, Neptune, working hard to keep the heart open. Saturn, Venus, maybe I said Saturn, Neptune. Saturn, Venus is the combination of protecting your heart. And it can also be armoring your heart. And so sometimes there could be a version of this, like if you're in a love relationship that has some stress or you're going through a hard time, you could become more defensive with your partner or armored with your partner. That could be a version of it where you're kind of in a sad situation. But then it's like the invitation of Venus is to like do your work, do the work of wisdom, the wisdom work, how you are a wise lover, based on your history of these are the things that help when we're in a harder phase of the relationship. And so this could be a great transit to go to couples counseling, to start a round of couples counseling or kind of go deeper with a couples counselor. Venus, Saturn, I consider the alignment of couples counseling. But Venus, Neptune, that's love and the divine. That's the heart chakra energy. That's the alignment each year where we have more of a potential for feeling the love of the divine, feeling the love of our higher self, feeling the love of the angelic plane, feeling the love of our ancestors, our spirit guides, our animal guides. And so it's a very special transit for opening the heart and having the heart melt. And so like Neptune Venus melts the armoring of Saturn Venus. And so it's I'd say quite a complex triple conjunction. I invite you to look at the one workshop that I did last year where I really went into a lot of detail about the Venus Saturn Neptune triple swing that happened. But I think that gives you some idea of some of the things I'd be focusing on during this window. And it's like, I think it's also Venus helping us enter into the Saturn Neptune initiation that's been so strong last year and this year, but building to the peak. Really, this is the climactic peak of the whole 2 years when it is the most exact. It was totally exact last year, but it's the most exact. It actually gets 0 degrees for the first time this year and in Aries, and it doesn't retrograde back to be tight. It gets back to about 8 degrees later in the year, after when Saturn and Neptune retrograde back to their furthest position. But this is when it's super tight and then it starts to separate the Saturn Neptune. And so whatever lessons we've been learning during this Saturn Neptune initiatory time period, it's like those lessons could be building to a moment where we're kind of integrating everything, and maybe also where something's going on in our life that really captures the qualities of Saturn Neptune, and where it's like, wow, this is it. Here we are. And of course, we can be experiencing it on the collective level, like what's going on in the news on a global geopolitical level. But then in our own individual lives, there's the potential for, again, like maybe you're grieving the loss of something, or you're being of service to somebody else that's in a grief process, or a whole range of other things that are associated with Saturn Neptune. like profound experiences of the other dimensions that are not this material three-dimensional realm, where Neptune is beyond this density of consciousness. And so Saturn Neptune is the combination of like ghost stories, and where paranormal experiences where the other side is kind of bleeding into this side. And so yeah, like you could be having some kind of really strong paranormal experience or being visited by an ancestor that's so vividly real, whether it's in a dream or a vision, or they're just standing there in the room with you. I remember a friend of mine who I think is, yeah, she's born under Saturn, Neptune, the square in the early 60s. She talked about when her mother passed away, how she just had the most profound angelic vision where she was like seeing angels in the room. She was like, they were real. They weren't like in her, in the third eye or something. She was visually seeing other dimensions present at her mother's passing. So that kind of profound experience can happen, maybe especially with Venus, where there's a heart opening to these other dimensions of reality. And so, yes, big time to be ritualizing your relationship with Venus, and a big moment for like inviting Venus into whatever your Saturn Neptune process has been about. Like maybe it's been a big, long disillusionment process. I feel like I've been in a pretty big disillusionment process on a political level. But as Venus comes in, it's like the heart could open again. Like when you go through disillusionment, there's a way in which maybe your heart contracts or you go into some kind of cynical negativity. But Venus is the invitation to be like, okay, yeah, that stuff is true, the disillusionment stuff that you're seeing, but love is also true. Beauty is also true. There are all these beautiful experiences that you can have in life while these other things are going on. And so, yes, that's the Venus Saturn Neptune triple conjunction. Just maybe I'll just put the calendar up again for a moment. Look at a couple other big dates in the year ahead. This is the second Venus gate around March 20th, or exactly on March 20th. It can shift a day depending on how big your time zone difference is. But yeah, this one is going to be much more visible. Venus sets an hour and 10 minutes after sunset. So you should be able to see this Venus gate for about an hour. And I think for a lot of people that come into the class, this may be the really big first experience of a Moon-Venus conjunction, ritualized Moon-Venus conjunction. And so, yeah, this one's 2 degrees square Jupiter. That's another thing to like always be focusing on. Are there outer planets that are in strong aspect to the Venus gate? In April, the third Venus gate happens. This one's conjunct Uranus. That one should feel like super different than the one that's conjunct the Saturn Neptune in March. And so that's going to be like super interesting for us to be focusing on that. What's the contrast between a Venus Saturn Neptune triple conjunction and a Venus Uranus conjunction, a Venus Moon Uranus versus a Venus Moon Saturn Neptune quadruple conjunction? And I mean, Uranus is liberating and freeing. You know, it has more to do with rebirth, and it quickens things. It kind of electrifies the heart, and there's more of a sense of awakening to love, being surprised by love. And then this one in May, the fourth Rose Gate. At this point, Venus is visible for 2 hours and 20 minutes. So if you go out to be with the Moon-Venus conjunction, you can spend a full 2 hours hanging out with her if you so choose. Super potent when you really hang out with the sky for that long a period of time, especially if you do it with somebody you love. When we would go on date nights with Moon-Venus this last cycle, yeah, we would tend to hang out with them for like an hour. And then go out for a meal for an hour and maybe check them out one more time as they're setting, that kind of thing. This one's square to Neptune and I guess Saturn as well, but it's much broader by May. And then this is the other one I really want to focus on, the Venus Jupiter conjunction that is happening in June. And the Venus gate that's happening around June 17th, where there's a Moon Venus Jupiter triple conjunction. That to me is one of the really high holy days each year when there's a Moon Venus Jupiter triple conjunction. There won't be another one visible in the evening sky for two more cycles, two 19-month cycles from now. That's about 3 years from this summer is the next time you'll get a chance to see a Moon Venus Jupiter triple conjunction, because that particular one will be conjunct the sun as well, and so not visible. And so this one, there's a lot going on June 17th. The exact conjunction is 0 degrees opposite Pluto, because there's going to be a Jupiter-Pluto opposition for a couple months this summer. That's going to be a big alignment, the Jupiter-Pluto energy. Talked about it in the most recent workshop. I talked about the Jupiter-Pluto opposition and how, yeah, it often corresponds to kind of epic global events. It has a kind of triumphant, big energy. Pluto intensifies the Jupiter expansive energy. It deepens it. It also brings more extremes and more drama, and where Jupiter's kind of like the global energy and Pluto intensifies that to the most massive level. And so it definitely has something to do with global scale international dynamics, not necessarily inflected towards the negative, but it's kind of a time when Jupiter and Pluto are in major hard aspect, especially the conjunctions and oppositions. You're just more likely to see the biggest power structures of the world at play, the epic struggle of power dynamics between nations and within nations. So that's going to be super interesting on the collective level. But the fact that Venus will be conjunct Jupiter opposite Pluto, yeah, that's kind of similar in the sense that Venus can kind of bring an opening of the heart in the midst of that kind of epic energy that the Jupiter-Pluto represents. What did I write here? Moon, Venus, Jupiter, and Mercury all visible after sunset with Mercury. This is another great moment to be looking for Mercury. And so just to skim forward for the calendar here, this is the second to last Venus gate in September. And then I mentioned in September is also when Venus is at maximum brightness. And then she goes retrograde and quickly heads towards the interior Cazimi and the Kiss. But this particular cycle, there's one last rose gate on October 11th, the 9th one, and the approximate last evening visibility of Venus on October 17th. And so, yes, that's the Venus cycle, the evening gate cycle. It ends. The exact conjunction is October 23rd. And yes, so now I just want to bring this up on the astrological software, and then we're going to shift gears. Just want to look at that Venus-Jupiter conjunction. Here's where she is conjunct Uranus in April. So that's going to be an interesting shift of energies at that point. And then this is where she comes on to Jupiter here. Around June 9th is the exact conjunction. And the moon comes onto it here. So you can see moon, Jupiter, Venus, with especially Venus opposite Pluto. Jupiter's 8 degrees opposite Pluto at this point. It gets more exact in July and August, but definitely it's a Venus-Jupiter-Pluto alignment here with the moon joining it. The Venus-Jupiter energy on its own, I said it's like a kind of high holy day where it's like the most positive energy. It's the two benefics in the astrological tradition, they're called, Venus and Jupiter. And so the two together are like the most positive combination, where Venus is love and Jupiter is joy. Venus is love, and Jupiter makes things bigger. Venus is your heart, and Jupiter expands it. It's the ultimate alignment of like vacations, for example. This would be a really interesting time period to be timing a vacation, timing more like opportunity for rest and enjoyment. Like a real vacation is both about rest, but also pleasure in like the things that you enjoy doing the most and the people that you enjoy being with the most. Sometimes Jupiter has to do with travel and Venus is love. So, like traveling someplace with your lover or meeting a lover while traveling. It's the best alignment for parties and weddings and celebrations and times where like there's that quality of joy simultaneous to the pleasure of intimacy in your social surroundings. And so I'd say this alignment is kind of like the the polarity with the Venus Saturn Neptune conjunction that's coming in March. I think there's likely to be a lot of healing that comes around this, even with the Pluto aspect to it. I really think we're going to be feeling that expansion of the heart energy. The Venus Saturn conjunction, like I said, can be sometimes a contraction of the heart where you have to kind of work at it to keep the heart open. This is often where you don't have to work at it. It's like you just wind up being pulled to a great party and your heart just opens. It just have a lot of pleasure there. There's Jupiter Venus is about really great experiences of food and of, I sometimes have called it like the Paris weekend archetype, where you travel somewhere that's especially associated with beauty and the arts and music. And in Paris, it's like the fashion under a Jupiter Venus conjunction. It's a great moment to gift yourself something that's like that makes you feel more beautiful, whether it's a piece of clothing or a piece of jewelry, or you just you take some of your financial resources to have a really special meal somewhere, that kind of thing. So yes, definitely another moment this year to be focusing on with Venus. And then what we looked at there is more as you get to later in the year, that's when Venus starts to do the descent. At this point, let's see, where's the retrograde? Here's approximately in early October is when Venus starts to go retrograde and she starts to move back towards the sun. But what's really happening is she's coming on to her closest approach to the Earth. And so this is a very special phase of the Venus cycle when she goes retrograde. The whole, how long is it that she's retrograde? Oh my gosh. Is it, it's 40 days that she's retrograde, I think. And like that whole 40-day period, I call it the embrace, with the exact conjunction when she's closest to the earth is the kiss. Also call it like the dance, the embrace, the kiss. It's potentially the most celebratory and joyous return of Venus to the earth and her most direct intimacy, her brightest moment in the sky. Or it's not so much the brightest, actually. Her brightness can dim when she's closer because the sun obscures her light to some degree. But it's that joy of the return. It's kind of like a lover who's been traveling and she's come back. And so this will be another moment to really be focusing on, and in the class we'll really be focusing on. And you can see she rapidly gets closer to the earth and the sun here. And by mid-October, she won't be visible again, but it's just 7-8 days. She pops out the other side and is visible in the morning sky. By November 2nd, she'll be back in the morning sky. So I hope that's helpful for giving you a sense of the coming months, a little bit about some of the energies at these important moments. So I want to shift to tarot practice. I hope all of you have a tarot deck that you love and your journal. Now we're going to kind of get out of whatever degree we've been in the left brain. I hope the tarot cards will take us more into the right brain, take us more into an intuitive state, unlock contact more with our higher selves, kind of taking in everything that I've said, being somewhat aware of these different big moments in the Venus cycle, her return to the evening sky around February 17th, 18th, that conjunction with Saturn and Neptune that comes in March, the conjunction with Jupiter that is in June, kind of feeling your way into the waves of 2026 with Venus, the waves that you're wanting to catch, these opportunities for opening your heart, these opportunities for expanding your heart, opportunities for bringing love into your pain. And I'll just briefly review the 5-card spread that I like to work with. Some of you know it. There's definitely maybe a couple, 3 of you don't know it. So the idea with this 5-card spread is it's a conversational spread, a conversation with your higher self, where the first card represents the beginning of the conversation and can represent a particular question that you have for your higher self. Sometimes the card will reveal the question. Second card represents the background to the question, background to the conversation. Third card is a sacred mirror, kind of mirroring back to you some important things about yourself in the context of the question or the conversation. By the time you get to the fourth card, it's like you're already in the flow. You're already receiving the download, but specifically it's the environment, people, places, and things that are relevant to the question and the answer. And the fifth card is the answer or the conclusion of the conversation with your higher self. And I'm going to just be shuffling here. The way I teach tarot is that it's a kind of mindfulness practice, like a meditative breathing practice where you're following your breath. But in this case, it's like you're being mindful with the shuffling, being present to the shuffling. And it should be just like a kind of very flowing, relaxed pace. Whatever pace of shuffling works for you to feel like you're not going to drop any cards. So that could be you might have to hold your hands really close. You're letting the cards slide from one hand into the hand that's catching them. And you're just waiting for the pull, the intuitive pull of the card. And this is a kind of training and practice for following the pulls of life, whether it's the pull of Venus or the pull to a new relationship or the pull to a new career. Try to have relaxed belly, relaxed breathing, no hurrying. And you just wait until a card comes. I'm going to pull 5 cards for all of us, but I invite you to be shuffling your own deck and intuitively pulling each card maybe at the same time approximate same time as I'm pulling each card. And I guess if I have a question for all of us that the cards could be helpful with, it's kind of like the question is, help me say anything more that needs to be said about Venus in 2026. Or help me kind of summarize what has been said, help us all kind of summarize and integrate what's been said and shared and looked at. Still waiting for the card, and here it is. Okay, interesting. This is the Osho Zen Tarot by Ma Deva Padma, my beloved primary deck, my favorite deck of all time. I love it because it has an Eastern spirituality emphasis. It's multicultural, I'd say, but it's especially Eastern. It's called the Zen Tarot, but it has a lot of qualities of Taoism and Buddhism. And so This is the card called Maturity. It's the Ace of Pentacles in other decks. It's the Ace of Rainbows in this deck. What's most important in the way that I practice tarot, and I'd say most teachers of tarot would say, it's like, it's not so important like to interpret the card and be aware of, say, the traditional interpretation, in this case of the Ace of Pentacles, but to like just see where the card takes you. Where does the image take you? Where does it take you in your imagination? How does it unlock the communication with your higher self? This is a kind of technology, a technology that unlocks the connection with your higher frequency self. And this is a perfect card, I'd say, because I talked a lot about spiritual maturity and the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And I feel like the path of Venus worship, if we can call it that, the cult of Venus, there's always been cults of Venus, and there's modern cults of Venus, I think in a positive sense. You know, Venus is not a cult leader in the problematic sense, but definitely draws together groups of people. And I think when you come to her, you go on a path of maturation, especially when it comes to love, intimacy, relationship, relationship with others, relationship with yourself. What does mature intimacy look like? That's especially a question for Venus, Saturn, Neptune. And so, yeah, conversation. I think we've been having a conversation about maturity and the potential of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction of 25 and 26 to be a really personal initiation that takes you to greater spiritual maturity, wisdom, and humility. That's the gift. Hopefully at the end of this year, we're all going to feel wiser and humbler and more mature on the psycho-spiritual growth path. Second card is the background. Relaxing and shuffling. And here it is. Love this card in the, I like to call it the Ma Deva Padma deck. She really created this deck, did all the art, wrote the book. Totality, 5 of Wands, 5 of Fire. For me, it's all about this image. Each card that, when you work with a deck for a long time, I've worked with this deck for 20 years, it's just like you start to have associations and a heart connection with each card, and it has its own kind of unique language for you. Each card is its own unique love language. But for me, this card usually represents friendship and the sense that I've got friends that catch me in the trapeze act of life. The sense that, you know, I'm trying to be at the peak of my skills, but I have others that are supporting me in my artistic practice. So this is an interesting one for the Venus, Saturn, Neptune. Some kind of the trapeze act is an artistic performance, and here are highly skilled individuals in their artistic with their artistic skills. And so, yeah, something about having other psycho-spiritually mature relationships that help you through the trials of life. That's what I have to say about that card. That's the background to our conversation about summarizing the Venus cycle of 2026. Third card is a mirror for me, a mirror for you, sacred mirror in the context of this class, in the context of our conversation. Oh, okay. Love this card. This is the Page of Water, Page of Cups. And I love this card. This is supposed to represent us. This dove that is flying free from the cage bars that are dissolving, where the bird is realizing, whoa, this cage isn't real. This whole thing is Maya, and I can be free to fly towards the light of the divine. This is like the disillusionment process. This is the breaking free of the matrix process. This is our bird self flying free towards heaven. You can think of these up here as like the angels that come to us when we feel trapped, when we feel imprisoned. And by doing psychospiritual practices, we realize the Maya of it all, the illusory nature of it all, and we get to escape the cage. Third card. I think it's especially through love, of course, that freedom finds us. And not rushing with this, kind of taking your time to shuffle, relax belly. Okay, interesting card that came here in the 5th position. Fighting. This is the Knight of Swords. Again, you've got these clouds. This is the Knight of Clouds in the Mahadeva Padma deck. And so it's very interesting representation of the Knight of Swords. In other decks, it's more just like a charging warrior, you know, aiming for the target, going somewhere strongly. Here in the Osho Zen Tarot, one thing I love is it represents kind of negative states of consciousness really well, like the meditation tradition where you start to see your thought patterns and how you're kind of trapped in negative states of consciousness, and you can relax and let them go. And so here's somebody that's kind of trapped in a negative, maybe a Saturn Neptune state of consciousness, and they're lost in the clouds, lost in Maya, easily triggered. How is that the answer, though, to this conversation about Venus? Super interesting. It's like, how do we quiet down that angry warrior within? I think Venus is the one. Venus is the only one that conquers Mars in the mythic traditions. She's the only one that can get Mars out of their armor. You know, there's a famous painting where Venus is represented, I think, as a cherub. And there's this warrior in the room, and they have their armor, but it's like the armor's on the floor, and the helmet's on the couch, and it's like the Cupid or Venus has released the warrior and overcome that warrior energy. I think that's what the world needs right now, is love to overcome hate, for love to overcome war. And maybe that's the practice of 2026, is those of us who are able to do this hard work, on some level, maybe bringing more love and peace to the world. This card just revealed itself. Here's the last card from the David deck, Harmony, 10 of Cups. So it's like, this is the contracted state of the world right now, the battles and the warriors of the world. But here the 10 of Cups represented as the heart chakra opening with dancing dolphins, opening the third eye. It's like, this is the energy that can come when we do our psychospiritual work to overcome these states, these contracted states of the aggressive warriors of the world. So I think I'll pull one more card. I always like to pull at least one oracle card when I'm doing tarot practice, and my favorite oracle deck is this one by Kyle Gray, the Angel Guide Oracle. Highly recommend it. Very high frequency deck. And here's the last message. Oh, look, love this one. It says learning experience. I think we've been talking about that. I don't think there's any bigger learning experience that can come than the Saturn-Neptune cycle. It's really the ultimate alignment of spiritual lessons, spiritual challenges that you have to use your spiritual skills to address. You know, it's like you've been learning, your skills in whatever class you've been in, and then you have your homework where you practice those skills, and you have the final exam where you really have to demonstrate your capacities. And I feel like Saturn Neptune's kind of like the final exam on the spiritual path, where it's like, okay, I'm going to throw you a few challenging lessons here, and how can you get out your medicine bag and do the work to move through whatever the challenge is? How do you demonstrate your wisdom and your mastery on the path? That's what we're all learning last year, this year, early next year. But it's like with Venus in the mix, if we devote ourselves to Venus while we're also in this learning experience, it's so much easier, I think. So much easier when you're actively pursuing love, actively working to keep your heart open. So, with that, I'm going to say thank you to everyone. I'm going to stop the recording here. We're going to take a little break. I hope you've pulled your own cards. I want to give you a chance. Let's take a 20-minute break, and we'll come back at the top of the hour. We'll have another 30, 45 minutes, and people can share. But the idea is, tune into where you're at, how you've taken in all this material. Maybe write a little bit about this experience today generally, but I guess some other specific prompts are like tuning into the 19-month cycle. What was happening for you 19 months ago, the last time Venus was about to return to the evening sky? That was in late June, was kind of the similar moment, late June 2024. But definitely in July, by mid-July, Venus had returned to the evening sky. What was happening for you in July of 2024, and how could that relate to this next month when she's coming back again? But then also, if you want to go a little further, you could go 19 months before that, which was November of 2022. That could be an interesting moment to tune into. Another moment when Venus was returning to the evening sky. And then the larger thing to maybe tune into was what was happening 8 years ago, like exactly 8 years ago. And I guess the prompt would be, when you're aware of the 8-year cycle of Venus, you can kind of tune into how an 8-year period can encapsulate a perfect work of art. It's like, think about the last 8 years as a novel, and you're at the epilogue phase right now. And it's like, how has it been a beautiful work of art? How has your life been a beautiful work of art over the 8-year time span? You could write about that. Obviously, you can take these writings. I hope you will journal about what's happened today, today or tomorrow. And of course, also considering the cards that have come for you and what they're trying to communicate to you in the context of everything we've explored today. And so I'm just going to thank everybody that's watching the recording, sending you blessings. I hope you'll consider taking my class, consider getting a reading. I love giving readings. That's the thing I love most of all. And so I hope maybe this will attract you to get a reading, a discounted $75 discount through Tuesday. My early bird for the class goes through Tuesday as well. You can check that out through the link. Okay. Blessings, everybody.